And what was a 130-121 win for the Indiana Pacers? Tyrese Haliburton didn't let the pressure get to him, not only figuratively and rebounding from the 20-point lead that was squandered in Game 3, but also literally, as his persistence to rebound ignited the offense in transition, with him amassing 32 points, 12 rebounds, 15 assists, 4 steals, and 0 turnovers to outpace both the Knicks and history to take a commanding 3-1 series lead. Here to talk about everything Game 4, everything Tyrese Haliburton being a megastar in Game 4, my longtime co-host, my favorite basketball writer, my favorite basketball talker, Samson Folk.
I neglected to mention it to you, but I ate a creamsicle yesterday. After I climbed, I tacked on a creamsicle, and there it is, the best game of Tyrese Haliburton's career. It is kind
How
of
you
funny.
restored the vibes. You restored the vibes by eating that creamsicle.
Yeah, it is kind of funny how insane it is that maybe it could make the case for like narcissistic personality disorder, the way I've been able to center the Pacers' performance around the proximity to things I do. What a game! Like, what a game! I couldn't believe how good he played. There was that one play where I think Brunson left it on the rim. Ty took it down, went and grabbed the rebound, immediately sprints out, sees that Turner and Robinson are kind of like locked in together, sees that Turner's on the Nesmith side of him, boom, goes out to Nesmith, skies for a dunk, and it's just like grabbing the rebound, getting the stop, running out, reading the floor perfectly. And then Nesmith on a sprained ankle doing all this. He's incredible. And then Pascal was obviously like so quietly excellent, as he's been for so much of this Pacers season. And then also Ben. We got the Ben game, and the Knicks kept playing show coverage with Brunson, which was nuts. But I mean, yep, they won. Front running again.
Tyrese in particular, what stood out to me is they did pressure. They extended their ball pressure some in Game 3, which we didn't talk a ton about because I felt overall a lot of the stuff, as we pointed out, was more these things are fixable. Here are the solves. Like some things that the Pacers, as I said, kind of tossed away the cheat sheet of answers that they had.
You know what? We did address it. Not long, but we did say like they bumped out their defense. They upped it. But yeah.
But anyways, point being is here in Game 4, Tyrese, 53 possessions as the bring-up ball handler. That's the third most for him in any game this season. 7 transitions, as you mentioned, from rebounds, which I'm about to run the film on, but also 55 ball screens. Most of any playoff game in this run, and most of any game this season that the Pacers generated 1.313 points per chance on. So taking all of those numbers together, if people follow, that's a lot of the ball in Tyrese Haliburton's hands, especially by comparison to what we were seeing against the Cavs, when the Cavs were more so using Okoro and Strus to be picking him up and face guarding 94 feet. And it was more so that Andrew was effectively the point guard in the second round. So I kind of felt like one of the main contributing factors to why he was able to maintain possession in the way that he was because he was attacking the glass as much as he did early going in that game.
It's kind of the same thing. Like Pascal made the joke. He said, Tyrese stole some of my rebounds. It's a joke. It's funny, but it's the same thing as like everyone before the advent of like the box out numbers or people kind of like focusing in. It was like, why doesn't this big have rebounds? Why doesn't Steven Adams have more? Why doesn't Brook Lopez have more? And the year that Russell Westbrook won the MVP and everyone said he was stat padding with rebounds, their points per possession was so much higher when Russ was the one who got the rebound. Like it benefited the Thunder greatly to box out clear space and have their offense grab it and go. And it's the exact same thing for the Pacers, who didn't do it with the exact same design. And honestly, there was this play, I can't remember if it was in the third or the fourth, maybe even the second. It was during the game. Tyrese beat Josh Hart in like a tap up volleyball jump ball sequence for a rebound. That's like Tyrese. We talk about it occasionally. He's a big point guard. His length has felt more real and more tangible on the defensive end during this playoff run than I think maybe ever. And on the glass there with 12 rebounds. I thought he was sublime. I thought he was scintillating. And I didn't write this in the piece, but I call my dad Pops. And I put it in the piece. I put nice to have Pops in the building. And then he did the interview and he said it was good to have Pops in the building. And I was like, what the hell, man? I'm from Oshkosh, bagosh. Anyway, what a performance.
The funny thing is, I talked before, like these aren't completely related thoughts, but about how him dealing with a hamstring injury ended up leading to him getting other developments in his game because of things he had to work around. And in a way, the Pacers are not a team that played much zone this season. They haven't really brought out the zone much at all in the playoffs because they haven't
Mhm.
necessarily needed to. And it hasn't really made sense for the matchups that they've had to this point. Although I suspect if they do advance to the NBA Finals, we might see it some. But the reason I bring this up is because early in the season, one of the concerns with doing that, and for most teams when they play zone, is the offensive rebounding.
Yeah.
And especially for the Pacers because they were playing Tyrese at the bottom of it. And you started seeing slowly but surely when they were playing more zone that he was fighting at that low spot to get tap outs and what you're saying, like against bigger players at the wing. He had to because that was going to be one of their, Achilles heels to running that type of coverage. And it's now since carried over to man where you are seeing him battle and actually getting some contested rebounds. Certainly not all of them were contested last night, but some of them were. So just to show the film on this, because I like the point that you made about Russell, because this isn't necessarily something that we see from the Pacers all the time. Like I said, 7 transitions from rebounds with him as the bring up ball handler last night. That ties a season high. I didn't look at what his career numbers are, but I think that has to probably be up pretty high with the career numbers as well, where he's finding shooters in transition, found Aaron running to the corner, found Miles as he normally does at the top of the key trailer. The one that really kind of blew my mind, that I've only seen him do this a couple times, is when he just brings it up the floor himself and used that fake handoff and then just immediately squared his hips right there to shoot the three. Like I've seen him do that maybe like once or twice. I haven't seen a lot of players do that in totality, but then, swooping in that corner crash, being able to get those, finding Neesmith for the diagonal pass where you can flip the floor against the transition that Tyrese is good at, coming in when Miles inexplicably turned that one over on the inbound play, and then he got the rebound. Anyways, with Karl Anthony-Towns sagged way back too far out there. But as the film continues to run right there, that one he got contested. And then I think they end up getting, well, this doesn't necessarily count as points for the possession because Aaron misses the shot, but then he gets that contested offensive rebound as well and ends up finding Tony Bradley under the rim. But out of those 7 possessions, they scored 11 points on 7 possessions. So 1.57 points per possession with him as the bring up ball handler's a pretty elite offense.
It's good basketball. I mean, there's a famous basketball philosopher says the basketball is the most important part of basketball. Now, I've heard that a few times. Don't know exactly where to attribute it, nor do I know where to attribute the efficacy of jump passes and whether they're good or bad. But it's all being talked about
It
as
happens that there's just
features.
a shirt that was somehow made on the internet that I occasionally wear and that Tyrese occasionally wears without fully knowing who designed it or where it came from.
Well, that was my first interaction with Tyrese Haliburton. Was I wore your shirt to the Raptors game, and Tyrese and I talked about it. Why? Because Tyrese is such a big fan of Caitlin Cooper's work that if he sees her shirt, says, "Hey, I like that. I've got the same thing at home."
They're thinking, oh no, that tedious writer.
Could you imagine how cynical you would have to be to describe you the first thing as a tedious writer?
But anyways, things that aren't tedious. Well, maybe they were somewhat tedious to an extent. I mentioned Tyrese, 55 ball screens for him as
55 ball screens, 55 milkshakes, 55 burgers. Do you know that meme?
no idea.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, there'll be people who get that. Anyway, go ahead.
But now I kind of want to know what we're talking about, so please explain.
It's an I think you should leave sketch where you know the pay it forward ethic, like in a drive-through.
Yeah.
This guy basically he goes to a drive-through and he says, "You know what? Let me pay for the guy behind me." He checks and he sees there's nobody behind him, and then he like peels out and pulls up behind that guy and orders 55 burgers, 55 milkshakes, 55 fries, and he tries to get the guy to buy him like an insane amount of food. But it starts this line. The lady behind him sees he's doing that, so she goes, and she anyway. So
I
it's really
understand now.
funny.
55 ball screens. is how many he had. And in part, he had so many because the Pacers were running so many double drags throughout this basketball game, particularly in the fourth quarter, in part for the reason that you mentioned, where you said the Knicks kept showing with Brunson. That was a change from the prior games where they were doing a lot more switching with Brunson, where at times in game three, you're like, when you get the Brunson switch, maybe you don't need to bring another screen. You could just go directly at Jalen Brunson. Well, in this game, Brunson defended 29 picks, most of any game in this series, and he only switched on 6.9% of them, which was the lowest frequency in this series. But the Knicks still gave up 1.5 points per chance with him as the screener defender. So, what did you make of, I kind of titled the piece where this video will be posted at, and said that, Tyrese handled the pressure in terms of both the pressure of needing to win a game 4, but also continuing to handle even against pressure, and that he was able to, flatly refuse, deny being handling by going downhill off of a lot of double screens. So what did you make of how much the Pacers ran that exact same action over and over and over again in the second half?
I think it speaks to their depth, one, and this is a roundabout answer a little bit, but it speaks to their depth a little bit because other star guards, as we've seen in the playoffs, they just have to go for major volume repeatedly, game in and game out. The narrative around Donovan Mitchell was different. Obviously, you illuminated like what the Pacers were trying to do, but Brunson is no doubt feeling it as well. That ask to constantly go up and get huge volume is tough, game in and game out. Tyrese was incredible. Like the sheer amount of control that he had over this past game was remarkable. But the Pacers don't ask him to do that every game. There's been games, obviously, we've covered many where Nembhard runs more ball screens than Tyrese. And it speaks to their depth that and the efficacy of Tyrese that like they needed it for one game. They might not need it for 2 games from now or 3 games from now, but they asked for it and he gave it to them with like stunning efficiency and decision making. And I really like that they have played, I've referred to the Pacers as like a counterpunch team for so long because they have so much variety in how they're able to attack. Having all of that variety, but in that variety also includes like being really specific and tedious in going to the same action over and over and over again and saying, Tyrese is going to have it. He's not going to get tired of this. Like going to Pascal 11 times, same action in the same quarter, he might get gassed. Tyrese, he had the juice. It was worth the squeeze. It was very impressive.
It was somewhat surprising to me that at a certain point in time, the Knicks weren't like, hey, maybe we should weak him away from getting downhill to his right off a double drag.
Nah.
Just downhill, 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 downhill. So let's look at the film of it to look at the story of what this was. So this isn't the double drag. This is just a refresh from game 3 where Tyrese got that switch against Brunson, passed it off to Miles, and then Miles chased his own pass to get Mitchell Robinson back on the ball. And then the Pacers attempted to play through the weak side corner to beat the scram that never actually happened, and Aaron sprained his ankle at the time. So this is last night where in the first quarter, you can see that Brunson's doing a quick show. So he's not outright switching on to Tyrese there. So they do then follow it with a necessary second screen against Mikal Bridges to get Mitchell Robinson, who is still switching. And Tyrese is like, well, you know what? I think today I will beat that switch with my shooting range, which is what he was doing early in that quarter. So then in the second half, they get to a spot where they now know, okay, Brunson's using almost exclusively show coverage to this point. Only here he doesn't even show. Like what you're pointing out when we're talking about, the usage that has increased for Brunson over the course of this series in the same way that did for Donovan Mitchell. I don't know that Tom Thibodeau necessarily wanted Brunson effectively in drop coverage off of Aaron Nesmith as the first screener. But once you've done this, as I said, he guarded 29 picks in this game. Just as a refresher, in the entire 7-game series last year, he defended 32 picks, I believe. 32 or 34. I'm not exact with the exact same number, but like Nesmith so far through 4 games has set 44 picks with Brunson as the screener defender.
Also,
so then
yep. Well, Karl and Miles is lean on me. Yeah. When you're not strong.
Yeah, that was like a little bit wild where Tyrese is just able to basically just split between the 2 picks and get all the way to the rim, even though Deuce McBride's trying to rotate over there off of TJ. He tries to duck under this one, and Tyrese still beats him to the spot and gets all the way in for a layup, despite the fact that Karl Anthony-Towns is trying to rotate to the rim there. So then they do, like, Brunson has to switch because it's kind of a confused coverage, and that's when he shoots the three. And then the one with the hostage dribble following that. So when you were watching all of this, I did start to wonder a little bit after like the fourth or fifth time of seeing this in the fourth quarter. Will they continue to press this button, given that it does look like you said, you might not be able to run the same play for Siakam 11 times in a row. It does look like it's losing
some of its
some
bite.
of its legs here while he's trying to get baseline, and then it's a kick out to Andrew. And then they're having to have Andrew do a little bit of creation with Jalen Brunson on ball. I mean, that is the benefit of having two guys who can create out of the pick and roll. But did you start to think there might be some diminishing returns here at all?
Well, certainly the offense was like a little more stagnant, and part of this was Pascal was off the floor for a little bit of that, if I remember correctly. And it seemed to me at that point, like they were just trying to, even though they were in the bonus from like 8 minutes left, they were trying to get to a spot where it was like, we know this creates looks and puts the ball directly in Tyrese's hands. And we want that because Nembhard, it's been 2 games now where his offensive output has been like quite paltry. Nesmith, despite having like a really great drive against Brunson, I don't think was providing this, probably for like a sprained ankle reason, is not providing the same juice versus Brunson. Turner is not, like, he did get Cat on a couple like up and unders during the game, but Turner I don't think is like, you want to run stuff through them. So I think they were trying to survive half court possessions without Siakam, and they did for a little bit, but I think that's the motivation. I think they kept going to it because they're like, this seems dependable. We can get looks out of this, and we'll just ask Tyrese to be like a bit of a superhero. That's the motivation, I think, there, which is like the perfect answer on the court isn't always there. Sometimes it's just ask your best player to be the best player, to be a tough shot maker. And Tyrese did create enough out of that over the course of the game. There was a dry spell for a little bit, but then, Pascal hits a 3 right away, and then you start trading baskets and then get down the line, and then you win the game.
I mean, I think quite clearly the other motivating factor as well is that when you're running a double drag with Brunson as the first screener defender and Towns as the second screener defender, you're repeatedly making them do something. Yeah. And that was telling because they tried to switch Brunson off of Nesmith and they put him onto Andrew Nembhard on this possession. And the Pacers still went to the double drag with Nembhard as the first screener. And you see the quick show, and Nembhard immediately slips out of that pick, pops in that direction, and then he's able to cut downhill, and then Pascal's in the game, and he makes that corner 3 out of the pass from the same action again. Now they're back to it. They put Brunson back onto Nesmith, and Tyrese freaking splits it again. Like,
friggin', let's go. Trey and I have had a long conversation about friggin' on our podcast.
Oh no, am I now going to be like, is this the next thing in line from my twang from the last episode?
Trey and I, because I don't say frick or friggin', I just curse.
See, this is the thing. This is my self-censoring for the podcast. Remember we talked about that. So then they get downhill, and this one was the telling one that you and I briefly talked about, and I tweeted about last night, because it's at the 3:10 mark, so Rick had to use it or lose it timeout. Tellingly, though, he didn't use the timeout until after Tyrese had come off this like gazillionth double drag, and they see that the Knicks has switched down the line and had Karl Anthony-Towns directly switch onto Tyrese. Then Tyrese is in like complete shock, staring at the bench as to why Rick called the timeout. But it is kind of funny because when we did the preview show and Benji was like, the optimum end of a possession, or what the Knicks should hope for, is that Tyrese is having to do a lot of dancing with the ball late in the shot clock to try to create an isolation. And I made the joke and I said, and there will be an immediate timeout if that happens, because I can usually count on Rick calling a timeout for one of 3 reasons. They give up multiple offensive rebounds on a possession, they didn't get back in transition, or he doesn't like what he's seeing in terms of isolation. So you can take that one of 2 ways. I think it probably more had to do with, we would like to get these guys rest, and we have this timeout. We're going to lose it if we don't use it, so we might as well take it. But also, he did wait until he saw how they were going to defend that, and then he took the timeout. I know that you said you briefly wrote about that. What was your thought when he took that timeout, especially with how aghast Tyrese looked in the aftermath of it?
Yeah, I let Tyrese's reaction guide me more than the context of the game. Like in my piece, I was like, I guess Carlisle didn't like what he saw because, yeah, Tyrese informs the viewers obviously position on what's going on because you would expect that Tyrese would understand the context too, but he was probably just thinking like, and we know Tyrese. In his mind, he's like, I'm about to cook this man alive. How dare you take the ball out of my hands? But it makes sense to use it. The play they got right after out of the ATO was not good. It was like an 18-foot fader from Nemhard that Siakam kept alive while battling with OG, and then
And
Turner
here it is.
obviously.
They've tried to pivot to stack.
Yeah,
I'm guessing because Rick saw it and was like, "Oh, they're switching down the line now." And they've been pretty bad switching our stack actions, especially if they're going to switch the ball screen with Cat, which they didn't switch the ball screen with Cat. They just switched the guards and he hopped around the screen. And then it did end up a little bit stuck in mud after the guards switched that. And like you said, it ended up with another Nemhard pull up too, which then Siakam was able to keep alive and Miles ended up getting fouled on. But I did tweet at the time, I'm like, wow, after you take that timeout, you really, really need to get something out of the ATO, which they ended up being able to get. But then this ended up being, I think, with like 2.5 to go here, the last iteration of the long drag of the double drags, where Tyrese ends up getting into the middle. And I think he kicks it, yeah, Pascal, and then Pascal makes the extra pass and Aaron attacks. And that's where Miles kind of pushed Karl Anthony-Towns into Aaron. And that was the last time they ran it. But it was a lot of opportunities. And I guess from Tyrese's sake, that's probably the most, like, if you think of him being an artist with a paintbrush, that's probably the most different strokes I've seen him take and paint out of such a basic action. And of course, some of that was born of the fact that the Knicks were like, Bridges is ducking under one time. Brunson's taking a really strange route with a show on some of these. What exactly is Karl Anthony-Towns doing? Just leaning on Miles Turner? I don't entirely know, but he did get a lot of different reads out of it, despite the fact that it did start losing a little bit of its bite over time, given how much Tyrese was taking on in this game. Because we really didn't even talk about it, and I don't have clips of it to show, but I mean, he did have 4 steals in this game. He was diving on loose balls in this game. Like, I really felt like he was giving everything that he had on both ends of the basketball court. And not that he
yeah.
doesn't, like, I don't want to equate and make it sound like shot volume is directly, equal 1-to-1 with aggressiveness and vice versa. But that was probably the most that Tyrese has given on both ends of the floor in a game in these playoffs. So I'm not exactly surprised by that, but
Yeah.
certainly interesting to watch them. Like, I've never seen them run the same play that many times in that short of a span of time.
I do see people juxtaposing the Pacers against the rest of the NBA teams as far as like, this is the beautiful basketball. This is not the grift basketball. Tyrese could stand to get a little grift in his game. Like Bridges being able to guard him while turning around and Tyrese seeing that as like, I have to find a new spot on the court. There's like 18 guards in the league that if your man has his back to you, there's going to be a collision and there's going to be free throws, like guaranteed. But Tyrese, he loves basketball too much for it, man. He's like, no, we got to work for a nice shot. I don't want to. And bless him for it. Also, the steals, like, I think Rick mentioned that he thought it was impressive that Tyrese was getting those steals without too much gambling and doing it mostly in the process or in the structure of how they want to guard, which I thought was true. And I also, in the piece I wrote, I kind of expressed a little bit of like, wow, not disbelief, but he got called for the foul. I believe it was his third on Brunson when they had to review the out of bounds play and they found that he had fouled him. It was like 2 plays later. He picked Brunson from behind on a double where he's just like, yeah, this is the read I'm going to make. And I was like, man, he just kept going after it, even after, like, it's like, is foul trouble on the horizon? Is anything here? He's like, no, I'm a playmaker. This is how I affect the game. Pascal in his post-game comments looked at the score sheet and was like, damn, he had 4 steals? It was like, yeah, dude, he did everything. He did everything.
The one that he got when he dove on the loose ball, and I think they got the timeout, or I don't remember exactly what the same outcome was, but Nesmith was guarding Brunson on the left side of the floor. And it was telling because, when we did this preview with Benji a year ago, I was like, let's go on a journey of all the different ways that they've tried to guard Jalen Brunson. And sometimes it's easy to forget that Rick was Jalen Brunson's coach at one point in time. And they were trying to funnel Brunson into the left corner and the right corner as much as possible. And so they were icing him, which they don't ice anymore, but they were icing him there, and then they were having another defender meet and try to corral him in the corners. And Brunson, being as worm-like as he can be, still split that trap in the corner and was able to step through and make a layup. And Tyrese having the better timing last night to come and do that double and try to steal it from the blind side and then dive on a loose ball was a development from where that coverage was, which it wasn't identical, but just overall his timing and knowing better where to be on the floor. And to Rick's credit, I mean, some of it's just like I'm on ball guarding Mikal Bridges and I'm getting a deflection and stealing the ball right with him trying to make a pass. So it wasn't even necessarily just him shooting passing lanes and sticking his arms in passing lanes either.
Also, I'll say as a quick thing, and I don't think you'll have this queued up. Usually where brains are in the same place, but there was a play where Nembhard had Brunson on him, and it was after they're talking about it on the broadcast. They're like, I don't like these triples they're taking, and I didn't like them either. They took triples 3 possessions in a row in the third quarter, I believe, and Nembhard throws a pitch to Pascal, who's guarded by, I think, Bridges. Brunson is on Nembhard, and Nembhard screens Bridges as Brunson goes to show. Pascal gets going downhill on ball. They collapse the corner. It goes out to Turner for a triple, his only make of the night. That's an example of like, if the toll is too heavy on Tyrese for like spamming, they have not gone to a lot of like Siakam inverted stuff above the break. It's mostly been working through the post and him as a screener. But I do think like if they have to throw a different look offensively to keep churning water, like the duck, there's probably potential for them to get something out of that stuff. I actually think the best part of that play is Nembhard's screening. It was like very crafty, very subtle, very well done. Because he knew the defensive coverage. He's like, Brunson's going to show, so I'm not screening Brunson. I'm going to just slide down and screen Bridges. It was like, oof, that's pretty nice work.
My take from that, because I don't have the clip to actually shine up here, is Jalen Brunson looked like he was getting very gassed even with the show coverage at times, because that looks like that's more quick than it is a show when you're just barely putting your arm out there and there's not actually any resistance and you're not taking a hit. But yes, they haven't leaned into Pascal as the ball handler that much, is just something that we talked about even back on the Pascal podcast about some of the, where could they go if they tilted some of the TJ possessions elsewhere. But so we got to talk about Nembhard's screening technique. We didn't mention it, but Nembhard also had a really good steal when he went to veer switch on the Karl Anthony-Towns that led and triggered offense the other way. Only 1 of 9 from the field from him. Massive game from Tyrese. Another guard that we finally get to talk about in a positive way. Bennedict Mathurin had the Bennedict Mathurin game. I thought that this was a terrific outcome from him, even though the box score is going to show that they didn't necessarily win his minutes. 20 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 5 of 8 from the field. Your thoughts on Bennedict Mathurin finally breaking through in his bench role?
So yes, he was a shot maker. He has great form on his free throws. It's just an isolated thing for him. It was good that he was shooting free throws at the end. I like that. It was good that he made his free throws when he and Brunson were jawing back and forth. That was my favorite thing about, like, obviously the pull-up 3 he missed touched every part of the basket. And he took an insane corner triple. But what Mathurin did was cut on time on target and provide a little oomph on the glass, because he is an extremely talented athlete. He is so comfortable with physicality. And that's where he can provide a lot, because he took the Brunson stuff and was like, I'm going to punish this dude. You talked about, oh, Brunson, that's a terrible show. Like, he looks gassed. It's not good. Now you got Mathurin in there like, I'm going to be such a dog, dude. You're going to be so upset guarding me because I'm going to cut. I'm going to press on the glass. I'm going to talk shit. I'm going to do all of it. And he brought it. And the shot making was there too. It's the piece I wrote at the end of the season. It was about how I was saying, like, Nesmith makes the most sense for the starting lineup. Mathurin is such a talent and has the ability to swing periods of the game. It's up to Rick to toggle this properly. And Mathurin can still develop within this context. Holy smokes. Rick talked about it. Pascal talked about it. It's like they're proud of how he was able to implement himself in this game. It was more like a Siakam game in this regard, in that so much was asked of him without giving him that much to work with. and the outcome was 20 points in like 3 minutes or whatever the hell. It was more than 3 minutes. It being hyperbolic. But yeah, he was awesome. Like,
So
credit.
I actually disagree. I think they gave him quite a bit to work with, and I thought that was pretty
Oh,
deliberate.
what? Okay, yeah, that's true. Yes.
Because here's why. And this is why I'm very, very happy. I'm happy for Bennedict Mathurin. I'm happy for the way that the game went off for him to have the breakthrough, because it completely juxtaposes from what I said on the prior podcast, because I showed the clip when we were talking about Ben didn't play in the second half. Why might that have happened? And it certainly wasn't only just because of that clip, but they ran floppy for Bennedict Mathurin. And it was for Bennedict Mathurin because Pascal wasn't on the floor. Sometimes they run floppy as an entry to get Pascal post up. Pascal was not playing. Jalen Brunson was guarding Bennedict Mathurin on that possession. And Jalen Brunson tried to shoot the gap and cut the corner, and Ben didn't make the read, knowing like, hey, if I cut back door right now, I'm going to have a wide open look at the basket. And I am super athletic, as you mentioned. And like, it's that stuff. Like, he's better playing out of sets, but you still need to be able to make the reads out of sets.
I'll amend my thing quick. Yes, they did run stuff for Mathurin. That's true. I did see your tweet about that. However, what I liked best was when that wasn't the case, because I don't like when the offense is Mathurin. I'll be honest, and I loved when he was able to create when it wasn't, or like create chaos and take advantage of it. However,
and what's interesting about that is there's times where TJ and Ben, I've oftentimes think that they play well together, because TJ does so often get 2 feet in the paint, and that unlocks Mathurin as a cutter. It just hasn't really come to full fruition and up until last night, when he had the really smart read where he kind of face cut up behind 2 guys and then curled back around. But
that cut was unbelievable. Yeah.
Okay, so the film of what I liked, it was telling to me, because when he first came into the game, it was on a sideline out of bounds play, and they ran wide for Bennedict Mathurin to come off that screen and get it, and then automatically go into pick and roll. And if people pay attention, TJ is cutting down to the ball side corner intentionally, because they don't want anybody helping off of TJ. And you might remember, Samson, that like 2 years ago, maybe, we did a podcast with Trey where I talked about my pet peeve of why do so many teams have to automatically tag from the single side, even when it behooves them to do it from the side where there's 2 players and you have a math advantage, and kind of showing that they were repeatedly doing this on possessions with TJ. But they're creating optimum spacing for Ben here, because even if Mitchell Robinson hadn't dropped back as far as he did for Ben to go right into this comfortable pull-up 2, there's only going to be OG Anunoby on the backside, and most likely Pascal would have lifted up from the corner as the pick and roll was developing. So he's only having to read one defender. That's better for Ben, and it was clear that they wanted this, because that's what they ran and put him into the game to do. And good for him that he made his very first shot of the game. But just as a comparison, when you and I talked about this like 2 years ago, is because I was talking about Jordan Nwora, who you're not familiar with, and I'm like, he's not like some great pick and roll ball handler, but he did way more of it with the Pacers than with the Bucks, because of that very play where no one would ever help from TJ in the strong side corner, because like, ooh, taboo, strong side corner, can't tag from there. And then they'd get easy reads to Isaiah Jackson as the roll man, because you only have to read one guy. So over and over again, the Pacers ran that exact same sideline out of bounds play, go figure, when they put Ben into the game in the third quarter as well. And this time, Jalen Brunson, who's guarding Bennedict Mathurin, he's like, oh, you're trailing me way far behind the play, and you look gassed again? Well, I'll just curl it. And then he curls into the catch and is able to score at the rim for the and one and finish. They ran the play again, and TNT's broadcast didn't fully pick it up. So sorry that it's clipped at the head of time, but he didn't curl the pick at all. Now he's being guarded by Josh Hart, and he just rejected it and darted directly to the rim on the same sideline out of bounds play again. Pacers have a 4th side out of bounds play, and this time he flips it to Tyrese and becomes the first screener. Tyrese then is able to get downhill. They call a foul. So they didn't necessarily get anything out of it. But I hope what people took away from there is the Pacers deliberately put him into the game on sideline out of bounds plays twice, plays that were for him, and he made a different read 4 different times out of the same set play. That's a good blending of Ben doing what Ben does with the Pacers doing what the Pacers do, and making it very seamless and melding the 2 things together. You could tell that there was other times too where they were running plays for him, because this they call L. This is really good for Ben. This is something that they ran in that game against the Wizards that I talked about, where it's almost like a modern floppy, because he has the opportunity in the corner where he can either run off the screen to the top of the key, depending upon how his defender guards him, or he can pop right back out to the corner, and it almost becomes a single double in that way, where he can go off the single from Pascal to the corner, or the double up to the top of the key, and then he can flow directly into the pick and roll. He showed a lot of patience here, waiting for the under, the rescreen, and then still navigating his way downhill and drawing the foul there. So just a lot of good stuff from Ben, where they did in fact call plays that are typically the Ben plays, but he made different reads out of them. And here, like a good clip from Pascal.
Mm-hmm.
Pascal and Ben have a good relationship together, in part because I know that Rick said, like, well, they both speak French and that's a connection point for them, and they have connections in other ways. So Pascal telling him, like, hey, this is a good opportunity to go double Jalen Brunson at the end of the quarter. The bench yelling out when to go do it, but a good timely double that I like that they were willing to show Jalen Brunson those, and then have Pascal make the read on the backside. And then even when Ben wasn't necessarily directly involved in the double, they did that again at the end of the third quarter, where Andrew went to double him as well. So I don't even have clipped in here too other things that I could have talked about here with Mathurin, is that he made 2 passes to Pascal, which, while not necessarily like manipulating the defense from Ben, one was a live dribble read at almost full speed in transition
Yep.
to Pascal for the 3, which means something. And also, if you're new and haven't watched a ton of the Pacers this year, probably 2 things that get the Pacers bench more excited than anything is TJ making a 3 and Ben willingly making a pass. The bench goes crazy when these things happen.
Yeah, I tweeted it out. I said I said that Ben had the Midas touch, because there was a period of play where every time he touched the ball, an incredible thing happened. Also, to that point, Pascal has been like a sublime communicator, like recently on defense. Like, he was always like good at it, but man, I think he's been quarterbacking stuff. Obviously, Miles does as well, but even on the makes, there's this play where it was McBride's make out of the corner where Tony Bradley didn't step up, and you can hear Pascal yelling like up, 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 pressure it, because he wants him to come downhill. McBride ends up making it, and Pascal's like, yo, yo, yo. But also while he's doing that, he's scram switching, I can't remember who out, so that he can take Mitch, and he's just like navigating all that stuff. You can see sometimes he organizes like a pre-switch. It's been really good, and his help side stuff at the rim has really ratcheted up as well. Like, it's been a very quiet thing, but Pascal, like, the impact numbers defensively, they're as good as they've been since the championship season for him. And it's not just like being put in the right context. It's that I watched him at the end of his Raptors tenure. Like, the life.
I watched him at the start of his Pacers tenure. This is a radical change from what that was.
The life and joy of his defense had been sapped. It even happened to OG Anunoby at the end of his Raptors tenure.
There's a soul tax.
Yeah, exactly. So watching, of course, this is about Mathurin, but that little anecdote of like Pascal, the defense has been pretty kick-ass. And he get 30 points.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't checked the cleaning the glass number these last few games, but at the end of the season, he was like right around the 99th percentile in on-off swing, and it was still hovering there in the playoffs as well. And some of that's because, like, not to be overly harsh here, but some of that's because he's replacing Obi Toppin, and at times Obi Toppin's defense has really been that bad. So the swing is going to look more favorably from Pascal, but certainly there's a lot of things that he's just done considerably better. And the communication thing is something that you'll often see from him and Andrew Nembhard, which is a little bit unorthodox, because sometimes the players that they're using to be off-ball defenders and really be roamers are calling out a lot of what needs to be happening with the peel switching and, like you said, the pre-switching at times. And you can see that communication in this game, and you can continue to see why Pascal has been considerably better on the defensive end than honestly than I anticipated him being this year. I thought that there would be somewhat of an improvement just because once he got more used to what the Pacers were doing, it would be natural for him, because you could see sometimes when he first came over, like, what is this? I mean, I've quoted Bruce Brown before, but like, and the defense isn't the same as it was when Bruce was there, but like he talked about, like, I've never done this before. Like, what the Pacers were doing was quite different. So there was going to be an adjustment period, especially from what Nick Nurse was doing with the Raptors. But next point, unless you have anything else that you want to add about Bennedict Mathurin.
Just that it was a hell of a game. And like, I definitely was critical of Mathurin it's been a couple weeks now of like, damn, looking for more. And I'll be honest, I didn't know, like, in some of you saying like this is definitely a read for Mathurin, this was designed for him. I looked at a couple of those plays and thought that was more like interpretive free flow. I didn't know it was as much like this is for you, Ben, go cook, which makes my commentary about like reading the floor like a little different. However, just like, hell yeah, implementing himself, not as wildly interpretive as I may have thought, but perfectly in the context of what was asked for him. So hell yeah, dude.
I think it was a perfect combination of both. I mean, I genuinely think that's what it was. Very great game from Ben. Next thing that I want to talk about, because I did harp on it on the Game 3 podcast, the Pacers made some adjustments to how they were guarding Karl Anthony-Towns in this basketball game. And while they certainly did not shut down Karl Anthony-Towns, and they still might have some things that they might want to consider tweaking headed into Game 4, it did look a lot different in Game 3 than what we saw in the fourth quarter when he went off for the 20 points. 20 of his 24 points in the fourth. This is just a refresher where I had pointed out, like, Tony Bradley, like, and he's given them solid minutes. I can't believe that, like, again, I don't want that to sound jaded about Tony Bradley, but like, I didn't expect him to be part of a playoff rotation, let alone in the Eastern Conference Finals. And yet he was out there in the fourth quarter in place of Miles Turner, and they didn't cross match it. He was guarding an all-star out on an island as a center, and that was somewhat questionable to me, especially in minutes when Jalen Brunson and Mitchell Robinson weren't on the floor. Similarly, like, it was mostly centers guarding centers. I believe it was 21 half-court possessions in the fourth of that game, where it was either Miles or Tony Bradley rather than Pascal or another wing. And then on top of that, they weren't doubling Karl Anthony-Towns either when he was going off for the points that he was going, which made me wonder, like, would we see adjustments in this game, or would they continue to try to do that and just hope that their offense would be more productive than what we saw in Game 3? Turns out the offense was more productive with Tyrese at the helm, and they made adjustments against Karl Anthony-Towns. So in the Bradley minutes, you will notice that Bradley is guarding Josh Hart, not Karl Anthony-Towns. That went to Pascal. Pascal had his most half-court defensive possessions against Towns as he's had in this series, which certainly some of that's because the Knicks are starting Mitchell Robinson, which has shifted Miles' defensive assignment, but also this is more than what it was in Game 3. And then tellingly, more things to bring up about Ben. Ben being on time and on target, that it was pretty clear to me that they were told if Towns was being guarded by a smaller defender, or not a center, I guess I should say, on the first dribble, they were doubling from the weak side elbow pretty consistently to force the ball out of his hands as best as they could. And there were, one or two times where they got burned on that, where they did find open shooters. One of the time there, you'll see one dribble, TJ's down, getting the double from that same spot, headed the other way.
Cat had a couple really nice, patient possessions where he looked like he exhibited a great amount of control against the doubles, and credit to him. But on the whole, it's definitely a better approach for the Pacers, I think.
Now you'll see one double, Ben goes again, TJ rotates. OG salvaged this because he found the corner and the shooter, but the shooter in the corner, I should say. I like the doubles way more. I would much rather, especially in these lineups when Landry Shamet and Josh Hart and DeLon Wright are out there with Karl Anthony-Towns, if those guys beat you from deep, then that's what happens. Like, I think you tip your hat and you're like, that's why we lost. Another thing that was changed is that when Pascal went to the bench, it was Aaron Nesmith, which I had pointed out, like, I wonder, will he be guarding Brunson? Will he be guarding Cat? Will it be some of both? Turns out he's hit all of the marks in terms of guarding Brunson, forcing Brunson to guard, and also guarding Karl Anthony-Towns. They cross-matched it in the minutes when Siakam wasn't on the floor, which him tipping that lob pass was great. Here he is guarding Karl Anthony-Towns in the post. You'll see that weak side double on the first dribble from Andrew Nembhard. He does make the pass to the opposite corner, but, OG...
Cat is... The flair he plays with is so funny. Like, the two good reads he made, that one, like, he had to do the fake and then spray it, and the other one he was like, yeah! It's like when he's at his best, he's doing like a loose impersonation of Nikola Jokic, and I mean that when I say loose. But man, I really like Karl Anthony-Towns, and I love that flourish that he plays with, man.
Then even in minutes, again, the Knicks are double big here. Pascal on Karl Anthony-Towns. The benefit of that is you can. They ended up just switching and letting Pascal absorb Brunson's length on the late switch between he and Nesmith. You're still seeing, again, second half in the Bradley minutes, Pascal's still on Karl Anthony-Towns again, rather than, more of him necessarily driving the big. Pascal does a lot better here to handle the face-up drive from Towns than what we were seeing against the bigs in Game 3 and in this game, because there still were possessions where fives were guarding fives, but I think overall they got enough possessions here from the wings and from Pascal and out of the doubles where they feel better about it. There's still going to be some spotty minutes, I think, where even when Brunson's on the bench, when Pascal has to come out and they go to the initial, Obi comes in for Pascal with the starters and with TJ, you don't really necessarily have a choice here, because if anything stood out last night, it felt like almost every defender was like going to be food guarding Brunson unless it was Aaron Nesmith. Like even Ben Shepherd had troubles last night with some of his execution on coverages. And so this is where it could still be like, okay, if it's TJ, Tyrese, Aaron, Obi, and Miles, you really don't have a choice. It still has to be Miles. And it feels like Towns, I mean, I harped during the regular season, like, please close out to his right hand. And they were closing out to his right more often. There, he's still even able to split it with, like, through a stunt from Aaron. So the stuff against the center still wasn't great, to be flat out honest, and Karl Anthony-Towns is an all-star for a reason, but I felt like they made enough little tweaks that they were able to survive it, especially given how frustrating some of the minutes were in game 3, the Brunsonless minutes with Cat out there, given what other lineups were out there, and why I felt they could have been more aggressive, showing him more defenders, especially given how often Hart is out there with Towns.
I have more flowers for Pascal. He did all that, and he routinely beat guys down the floor. And he ended up taking a lot of possessions where, like, we obviously don't have it, but the start of the third quarter, they're like, Pascal, like, you kind of have the runway. You have the Cat matchup. Go at it. And he did. And just, Cat is a load. Like, and we've talked about, like, Pascal, like, he obviously has great conditioning, but, like, he does a lot for the Pacers. These games, the same thing for, like, Tyrese on, especially on offense, but his playmaking on defense is, like, the quiet excellence of Andrew Nembhard in the playoffs before the past 2 games, of, like, how much offensive load he was able to take, has kind of been offset towards the other guys. And Pascal has become a defensive linchpin in a way that he wasn't in, like, taking this big matchup. And while he does have the help from doubles sometimes, he still has to do so much. And he's really met the moment repeatedly. It's been a few, like, unbelievable games from him overall.
Yeah, and they doubled on 25% of Towns' touches, which was the highest double frequency in this series. And it can be hard just to double him, quite frankly. Like, they're only doing it there in the post because it is a little bit more stagnant, and they're doing it pretty clearly on the first dribble. But, like, that's why I like having him being guarded by Pascal or Nesmith when you can more often, because it moves more of the offense into the post rather than through drives, because it's way too hard to try to double him, especially when he beats a big on the perimeter and there's no rim protector back there behind him to be able to stop him. So that, and then, like what you just said, just to add some context, 29 half-court matchups for Siakam against Towns in this game. During the regular season, nobody else other than Miles and Thomas Bryant, Obi, and Isaiah Jackson even logged 10. Like, it was pretty much centers versus centers. So, and again, some of that's a lineup change, but some of it's also like Pascal's handling it better. So let's tip more of it there.
Do you have the numbers on what was the plus minus of the double big lineup for the Knicks last game? Do you know what that was?
PvP stats has the Knicks as -8 in 10 minutes with Towns and Mitchell on the floor in game 4. So okay. They won the minutes. You're correct. The Pacers won the minutes pretty handedly. Like, that's what I thought in first blush, that wasn't necessarily the problem. It was more so, like I said, I understand the logic behind why they did it, though I still think that the adjustment I would have made would be to have started Deuce McBride in place of Josh Hart. I think that would have created more problems for the reasons that you're seeing in some of the Towns only minutes, in that when there's a spread lineup out there, he's pretty much being able to run rough shot, although, like I just pointed out, adjustments that the Pacers made that they likely still would have made in game 5 if that adjustment would have been there. But I think that overall, that's what I would have liked a little bit better if I was the Knicks, but I understand the thought process behind it. Last thing that I wanted to point out, because I did point out Mathurin being subbed in for those 2 slob plays. Obi Toppin came in when Miles Turner fouled out and immediately bangs in a 3 out of a baseline out of bounds play. And that was a read from Tyrese to make that pass to Obi, with Obi slipping back out to the perimeter. But just to show people, like, the journey of that particular baseline out of bounds play and why I liked it, is they typically, when that alignment's out there, Aaron's going to shoot through elevator doors. And the Knicks have really been squeezing that. Like, he barely makes it through there. And then he did end up making that 3 when he was, a flamethrower in New York. They tried running that again when they got back to Indiana. And a lot of times it's just a distraction where Andrew missed that shot, but sometimes they'll just use it so that the person standing there at the weak side block can do a quick back cut and get something at the rim. And this game, they went to it, and they knew that they had been squeezing those doors, like I said. So Aaron rounds the entire thing, and Brunson kind of, like, had a strong initial thrust and then fell asleep a little bit, and that's whenever Aaron was able to get to the rim out of it. So,
wrong foot jump off a sprained ankle, by the way, for that dunk. Crazy.
There you go. So the Pacers 7-point lead when Obi Toppin comes in, when Miles Turner fouls out. They go to that same thing again. And because Brunson had kind of had his slip up that he had earlier in the game, Bridges helps off of Obi Toppin. So Obi Toppin just backs it out to 3, and Tyrese makes that bounce pass to Obi Toppin to bang in that 3. So the Pacers were very successful with their blob and slob play execution in this basketball game, especially coming from players who were coming in cold in many instances right off the bench to be making shots.
It's excellent penmanship by Mr. Carlisle and his team. That was do you have like a coach's board, a whiteboard over there? It delighted me to no end because I was doing the Carter Bryant film, and he performed a veer back switch, and I was like, "Ooh, very nice." And then somebody was like, "What the hell does this stuff mean?" And then I got to draw up peel switching, nexting, veer back switch, and I got to drop the counters to those things on the last live stream I did, and I was just like, "Man, it's so nice having like the coaches board." It makes me feel incredible. I'm just like, look what I have.
You've upgraded from your tiny notepad.
Yeah. Well, I actually got that that was a birthday present from Josh Codenera, professional scout extraordinaire. He gave it to me, and I was like, oh my God, thank you.
I think I would have a lot of trouble drawing on a board while I was looking into the StreamYard camera because it would be like reversing what I'm drawing.
I have definitely, there's been me
skill.
going like, what the hell am I doing? But I stopped looking at the StreamYard camera, and I just started looking and drawing it up and just being like, people will see it. I put trust in the viewers.
Like you're a painter on PBS that people can follow.
Oh, I'm Bob Ross. Yeah. Yes. Got a lovely little tree there. Yes. And he's got some friends.
Actually, you're talking about veer back switching.
Yeah. And this is a veer back switch. It's a great read from Andrew Nimhard. Okay. Just lovely. Lovely. Take the ball up.
I've learned since we've started doing this podcast that you're very good with the impressions. You're like,
you just have to evoke. You just have to evoke. Like most famous people have like a fairly unique way about them. So you just have to evoke that, and people are like, oh yeah. The vocal quality doesn't have to be that close, I don't think.
I think they're pretty impressive. I think they've been pretty spot on, the ones that you've done. People will recognize that one a little bit more than the Lewis impression, but the Lewis impression was pretty spot on.
Lewis hates the Lewis impression so bad. Oh.
Well, did you have anything else that you thought of that I didn't clip here together? I mean, some of the things you did think of along the way that I was lacking in my clip preparedness, but that you noticed from this game that you wanted to talk about?
As is my way, I did not bookmark anything for the end. I simply blurted out during and have you audible to whatever me making the conversation about. I'm perfectly happy with what I provided to this conversation.
You said ahead of time
topics.
I'm now very embarrassed by my twang. I don't think I've ever had twang like that in my entire life. And I didn't really think I had twang. I thought I was having like a sarcastic snarkiness to me. I thought that in real time.
Twang
but
is
then
better than
when I edited it, there was a definite twang, and then it led me to wonder, how often am I having this twang and I'm just not aware of it?
I mean, you do it. It's just I don't like would I like it if I as a person said for more often? Like, what is that for? Or that's for something else. Do I often, if I listen to myself back, hear a very Canadian man saying, well, that's for fur? Like, I do say it. I don't say about. It's not like that. I say about, which I think is normal. I think the out is there. But, I mean, it shows up. It is what it is.
It showed up, like I said, when we did the passes out of the post podcast, because I started pronouncing out the way that you would. I noticed it by the end. I'm apparently susceptible to other people's pronunciations.
How do I say out? Out.
You were saying it the Canadian way. There was like an ooh.
Out? Out?
Hmm.
Oh, what the hell? Oh, Jesus.
And then I started slightly. I'm apparently susceptible with my pronunciations over time.
Wow. You're what's the term? Like, oh Jesus, I can't think of it. It's not a gecko. It's not a salamander.
A
It's a
chameleon?
chameleon. A chameleon. Yeah, there we go. Yes, a chameleon.
There's lots of lizards being brought up, and you know how I feel about lizards.
Yeah. I've been playing Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and they have lizards. They're called Lizalfos or Lizalfos. I don't know but they're lizards that carry swords and spears and stuff like that. You would be absolutely petrified trekking that little land.
I wouldn't be a fan. What's
Yeah,
your favorite video game you've ever played?
that's a good question. So I think probably it would be Fallout New Vegas, which is tremendous, or The Last of Us, or Red Dead Redemption 2, or Zelda the Wind Waker. Zelda the Wind Waker has a very special place in my heart because my older sister, we would see her during the summer and like during holidays, and she would come over and we'd turn on the GameCube and like we would take turns playing the Wind Waker and we would listen to Billy Talent, a
Yeah,
Canadian like punk rock band, and we would just like play around. So it's very attached to the nostalgia part of my brain. But Red Dead Redemption 2 is like fantastic. And The Last of Us, the first game, I didn't like the second game. I'm not getting into the politics of it, but anyway, I loved the first game. And Fallout New Vegas is sublime. Just like incredible.
that's somewhat similar to how people will know when I launched Basketball She Wrote. I compared it to an episode of Gilmore Girls, and I wrote in it that Gilmore Girls probably is my favorite scripted TV series, but not because I actually like the TV series that much, but because my sister was getting married when the last season of that was airing, and she was going to be moving out. And we made time, like, despite the fact that I was super busy and still in school and she was going to be moving out, we made time and watched that live every week. And so, like, now when it's on, I have to rewatch it. Like, there's
Uh,
many things about Gilmore Girls that do directly relate to our lives.
well,
I could be constantly bringing that up like you do with Dune on these episodes, but I know it's not going to sit. I know that my comparisons are just going to, like, it's not going to be there.
it's no wonder that you like snark and quick wit. Sweet, precocious Rory always has a little something to say. Hmm.
No, my favorite character, Jess Mariano, has something to say. He loves books and he has snappy humor. That Jess forever. Season 6 Jess, people. I'm always season 6 team Jess. So is my sister. I will not hear any other arguments. But yeah, a lot of things that I like are typically more tied to nostalgia I've found than even sometimes like how much do I actually really like this thing. But that doesn't necessarily apply. My favorite video game, in case people cared, which I don't know that they necessarily will, but it's Grim Fandango. And when they remastered that for Switch, heck yeah.
Wait. What other video games are you playing?
I like point and click adventure games a lot. Like, they don't make those anymore. They need to make more of them. That's why I like Grim Fandango so much, and also the story of that's pretty great. I think, have you played it?
No.
Oh, you should get it. I think that you would like it based on what the story is and how it turns
Mm,
up.
okay. Um, what a name, Grim Fandango.
Grim Fandango is it's kind of based around the Mexican Day of the Dead holiday. That's why it's called what it's called.
That living like when I lived in Mexico, Dios de los Muertos,
Hmm.
ooh, cool. That was by far the coolest thing to attend and like be part of when I was living in Mexico because it's definitely is like people are just like, it's like Mexican Halloween. It's like, no, it's not. It's something completely different. It's really cool. That was my favorite thing I attended while in Mexico, I think, probably.
And here you told me, I mean, not exactly the same, but here you told me you're not about the festivals. You don't go to the festivals.
It not like I've seen enough. I've seen enough of what like Americans and Canadians get up to. I've experienced it. And I'm like, okay, but to experience something like in Mexican culture for the first time is pretty unique and pretty cool. I'll give anything a try one time around.
Oh, I think, there's going to be people in the comments who have played Grim Fandango, I can about guarantee. It was popular enough that it was remastered. This is
I,
this is my latest recommendation to you that will sit somewhere for like 5 years that you'll never you'll never engage with, but it is a great game.
That was a Midwesternism as well. I can about guarantee. Oh, there you go.
Oh no.
I'll put 5 on it right now.
I've
Hot
become
damn.
very embarrassed of my own personality the longer we've done this podcast. I don't really know how I'm going to
No, I
rectify
think
it, but
you should embrace this.
I would be curious. I will be interested to find out if the Pacers continue their current good run of play and advance to the finals, and our trip manifests, what you're going to pick out as things that are like, wow, these Indiana people do X, Y, or Z that I won't realize is an Indiana thing, but you'll notice it because you're coming in from the outside. I would be very curious to know what those are.
I'm just trying to see a
Thing
bald
is,
eagle.
which I mean, some people said, they corrected me. I still do not necessarily think that you would see an eagle if you just walked out of the front of Gamebridge Fieldhouse, but people did say that they have seen eagles in and around Indy in various parts. So I guess it's a possibility. I'm not going to completely rule it out. Apparently, I've been told that these eagles have been flying around Indiana for quite some time. I had never seen one in the wild in my lifetime up until like the last month. So apparently, that was a much bigger thing than what I had
That's
known
because you,
of.
Caitlin, you're too busy looking down. Me, I'm looking up.
I'm too
Eyes peeled
busy
to the sky.
inside looking at a computer where you're not going to see
Yeah.
a lot of animals, period, most likely. Too busy staring at screens and talking into microphones about this, that.
You gotta touch grass, Miss Cooper.
Actually, I mean, I go for walks a lot in the summer, but the weather this spring was not very conducive for that, and being sick was not very conducive for it either. So I really do need to go out, and I didn't like the pronunciation of my name just then. That was
Cooper?
pretty icky.
Coop.
Let's not with
Wait.
that.
Cooper? Cooper. Wait. Cooper?
Yeah.
Cooper. How am I saying it wrong?
There was a twang.
Oh, it's because I said Ms. Cooper.
And that one too, that makes me feel ancient. Kind of like when you used to get on every podcast and be like, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
How old do you think I am over
No, it's
there?
not. It is not a value judgment on anything. It is simply a reflection of me. Just think about how I speak. It's nonsensical. I throw in words that don't belong places. So I say, yes, ma'am.
I wonder what I could say that would like
you can't
be
hurt
bothersome to you.
Nobody can hurt me. The things that have been said about me online, and I know I don't deserve them. But like people are rude and terrible online. Horrible. So there's nothing you could say, Caitlin. I am indestructible. I am Neesmith's ankle.
You've almost replaced your actual name because now there's people who really believe your name is Samson Folk.
Hell yeah, dude.
Caitlin and the Samson Folk podcast.
Yeah. Front runners.
Okay, well, the Pacers are one win away from the NBA Finals, where hopefully we get to continue the front running beyond this series. I'm going to let you close it out because I'm not sure how well I did with Have a Blessed Day and the last one, although I did edit your piece last night when you
I was so excited.
Carelessly forgot to tack that on.
It's the second time in this playoff run. So for anybody who enjoyed this, you just got to the end of like 25 minutes of banter. So you probably liked what you're seeing. The Pacers are on the brink of a finals appearance. This has not happened in 25 years. If it does, if you want to fully indulge in and enjoy this finals experience, this Eastern Conference Finals experience, do it with our podcast, of course. I think it allows an understanding of the game, what the Pacers are succeeding at and failing at to a degree that you literally will not find elsewhere. And most teams have never had this type of coverage. Truthfully, never had this type of coverage. It's unique. It is novel. You can do that with YouTube, of course, but also subscribe to support us in our novel and unique work. You get all of our written work at Basketball She Wrote, the Patreon. We think it's worth it. Somebody described it as economically priced the other day, and I agree. I tend to agree in a comment under one of my tweets. I think that was a compliment. I think like this is affordable. Anyway,
cheaper than Substack. Cheaper than Substack.
Caitlin is, in my mind, should be in most minds, the best basketball analyst in the world, and we do all our work there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it very much. Like, comment, subscribe. It helps grow the channel. About half as many people watched the loss as the win. So let's get those numbers back up, baby. Thank you for tuning in with us. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.